Now, you're down in Texas, right? You're still living down in Klein or nearby?
Yes, sir. Right in what was always called the Klein community, which is now. I joke that I grew up in the country and now I live in the city, but I haven't moved.
How does that work?
Well, Houston has grown out to us.
Yeah, it
What
has.
used to be a rural German farming community is now the suburbs of Houston.
Now, you've got some real roots down there because you didn't just happen on to Klein. In fact, Klein is named after, is it your great grandfather?
Well, my mother was a Klein, and so that's my maternal family,
Okay.
and my grandfather's grandfather, my great great grandfather, was the first Klein to come here. He left Stuttgart in Germany in 1848, and as so many people did in those days, and he arrived here in 1850, 1851, depending on who you ask, and he the story goes would go into Houston and pick up mail for folks, and they'd come over to his place to pick up their mail, and so they started referring to the area as Klein. It's still an unincorporated part of North Harris County. So it's not a city, but it was always called the Klein community. And thanks to the school district taking on the name Klein, our family name will continue in the area.
Yeah. So you're truly a country boy and you live in an area that's named after your family. So that's some roots, man. I'm telling you.
Well, I tell you, I grew up around my extended family. My mom was one of seven children, and my grandfather was a vegetable farmer his whole life, and his sons carried on the farm in different ways. My two uncles turned it into a dairy, and one of my other uncles was a produce dealer and helped the local farmers get their produce to the old farmers market on Airline Drive. So I grew up in a farming atmosphere, and part-time work was easy to come by because there's always plenty to do. I was a helper in the dairy barn several summers growing up, and I tell you that makes you appreciate doing something for a living, like just making stuff up and playing and singing.
Yeah. You didn't get serious about music until you were in your 20s, right?
Well, it was for as long as I've played guitar, I should play much better than I do. My second grade teacher was married to a gentleman that was in the music store business forever, from one of the old families out in our area. His name was Charles Wenchy, Wenschhe, and I came home from school one day, and my mom said, "What would you think about taking guitar lessons? Mr. Wenchy teaches guitar lessons." And I said, "Well, that'd be fun." And that was about it. I mean, there was no forethought. They bought me a little starter guitar, and Mr. Winchy taught me a few chords, and then he stopped giving lessons, and my mom set me up with a music teacher in downtown Houston, close to where she worked. My parents both worked for the old Humble Company, met working for the old Humble Company, which became Exxon,
Right.
and my mom was there for 40 years, my dad for 37. But once a week, she would drive. She'd get off work at 4:45, fight the traffic all the way out. We're 28 miles northwest of downtown. She'd fight the
Right.
traffic, pick me up, take me back in for a 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening music lesson, while my dad worked late on those nights. And I'd have my guitar lesson, and then we'd all three go home and stop off at our favorite Mexican food restaurant it was the lessons were on Monday nights for years at first, and then Thursday nights after that, and so that was something we always did too. One of the things about my parents both working in the same place, and because of the commute in those days in Houston was about the same as it is now, with fewer people, but the roads were much smaller and not as many. My parents rode to work and back home from work together every day, and so that
Oh,
could be up to
wow.
an hour and a half each way. So they even though they didn't work together at the office, they spent lots of time together every day, and that's something I think back on as what would be a lovely part of a relationship,
Oh,
and
of course.
we just always did things together.
Yeah, that's great to spend that time together. That's great. Now, when you started playing, did you know it was a passion right away?
I didn't know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and nobody at the little Lutheran school I went to, Trinity Lutheran, there were and there were 10 of us in my first grade class, and we grew to a class of 12 by the time I was in the eighth grade. In my first grade class, there were 2 girls and 8 boys. One of the girls was my first cousin, and Wanda is her name, and the other girl's last name was Klein, but was no relation. But so even that sort of made the idea of, dating impossible. Somebody that might be related. So it was a very small school. Nobody else even had a guitar. So I felt sort of singled out just because I had a guitar, and
Right.
and we get to play occasionally in school. Nothing complicated, but I would be asked to play occasionally for school functions, and that was a big boost to me in those days.
Well, it's so interesting that you got traction in the 70s, and along the way picked up degrees in journalism and German. So it wasn't like you were laying around watching the grass grow. What was it that finally triggered you to start writing and actually making this a career choice instead of journalism or something else? Why this?
It was, I knew by the time I was in school and playing out, I got my first paid gigs when I was 18 in the summer of 76 with a high school buddy of mine. Bruce Lyon is his name. And Bruce was a motocrosser as well. So we had lots in common, and he's a year older than I, and he got his driver's license a year before I did. And so he and I would go into Houston to H&H Music in those days and take guitar lessons. We worked up some songs in the summer of 1976 and got a couple of local gigs in restaurants, a place called the Mariner on FM 1960, because their regular bar singer, guitar player, entertainment wanted a couple of nights off that summer to spend more time with his children. So we played on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I just loved it. I just loved doing it. And when I went back to school, I just kept trying to play. So it was then that I realized how much I enjoyed doing it. I never thought that it was a realistic thing to aspire to be able to do it for a living. I mean, we made $50 a night at the Mariner, and that was huge. My parents sent me to school, so I didn't have to worry about paying for my tuition or my rent. And any money that I made playing, I could save up and put back into buying new equipment or saving up for a
Right.
new guitar and making my sound system better. So I did just that, and just kept playing after that everywhere I could. You asked me earlier how I came to want to write songs, and it really was a feeling of not being able to play someone else's song adequately. I thought to myself, I need to make up my own songs. If there's going to be a reason people want to listen to me, it has to be not for my voice necessarily or the way I play guitar, but for my point of view. So I started making up songs really to show my take on things, and I felt like that was the strongest thing I had to offer.
And you do have a unique point of view. You've said people don't want to hear how well things are going, so you kind of write about, pain, conflict, whatever. What led you down that path? Because you do write about, as someone trained in psychology, you cut to the chase about relationships and life and things like that in your songs. And I think that's what people relate to so much. I was just curious how you landed on that particular way of writing songs, that particular point of view.
Well, you have to be careful what you say in interviews over the years, don't you? It really, my approach to songwriting isn't really an approach. I mean, I feel lucky to make up anything that holds together from the first line to the last line and sounds halfway decent. I really in writing a song, I rarely think about the audience or who the song might reach. It really it's really just sort of self-therapy, writing a song. So I've always felt free enough, free in the sense that if you write something you really don't like, nobody ever has to hear it. That's one thing you
Right.
can absolutely guarantee. But I've felt free enough to write about things that I've actually gone through, and to write about write from real life experiences, not necessarily trying to create experiences. And some songs have more truth in them than others. Some songs start off with a kernel of truth and spin into some fantastical story. But some of my songs are not so much written as they are just written down from things that have happened.
Yeah. Do you know when you've written something that is going to be a hit? Can you tell? Does it feel right to you? Can you tell one from another?
Thank you for saying the word hit. But in a way, I've never had a hit, and that's I've had some songs that have made it on the charts, and I have a few songs that people seem to ask for every time I play. But what's important to me is just to have a song that feels good to me the first time I play it in front of people. I'm not looking for necessarily how the audience reacts, but I'm looking for how if I feel self-conscious playing a song in front of you, then I have to reevaluate that song. But if I feel confident playing a song in front of you, then I feel pretty solid about it.
Right. Well, you're very humble the way you describe all of that, but you've got 4 Grammys, 17 nominations. You've been on the country charts. You've been on the Billboard charts. I mean, you've had a lot of hits, a lot of songs that have done. Just look back decade after decade, you just seem to keep turning up and on both charts. And you'd gravitate away from country, then you'd come back and win those fans back again, and then gravitate away. You just do what you want to do, and people seem to find you.
I have always been lucky to work with folks in the music business who've given me a free hand creatively and supported sort of how I wanted to the kinds of songs I wanted to record, and that's unusual, really. And part of it is, and I appreciate your saying that. I'm so grateful for the career I've had, but if you have a big hit, for example, you can kind of paint yourself into a corner. People might want to hear something that, do us another version of that song and let's have another big hit with it. You could be subjected to that kind of expectation or that kind of pressure. And I've worked with folks that have helped me to do what I want to do. And that's a wonderful feeling.